Have you ever wondered what it feels like to want love, but not know how to accept it when it finally arrives? Imagine being a young woman, scarred by loss, who has built walls so high she no longer believes her heart can be reached. Then picture meeting a cowboy, strong, steady, carrying his own grief, who dares to whisper that love is worth the risk. But here's the question: when your heart has been broken, do you shut the door to protect yourself, or open it and risk everything again? If it were you, would you take that chance? This story asks us to step inside that choice, to remember the moments in our own lives when love felt dangerous, when fear told us to run, but hope whispered to stay. So join me as we walk dusty streets, hear vows spoken in a small-town church, and watch two wounded souls discover that home is not a place, but a person. If this story touches your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel, because now the journey begins. The Wyoming sky blazed red and gold as Eleanor Hart pulled her worn shawl tight against the October wind of 1876. 3 months had slipped by since her father's sudden death had left her with nothing but debts and a weather-beaten cabin on the edge of Willow Bend Creek. Now came the final blow. The banker had claimed the only home she had ever known. Miss Hart called Silas Croft from his buggy, his voice carrying across the yard. "I'll expect the keys by sundown tomorrow." Eleanor gave a stiff nod, refusing to let him see the tears burning her eyes. At 22, she had no kin left, only $7 in her pocket, and no place to belong. 20 miles north lay the mining town of Copper Ridge, her one hope of work and a roof before winter closed its grip. When the buggy rattled away, Eleanor sank to her knees in the garden her mother once tended with love. Consumption had taken her mother a decade earlier, and her father's failing heart had finished what grief began. "Alone now," Eleanor whispered into the wind. "Nothing good ever seems to last." By dawn the next day, cold and bright, she packed the few things she owned: 2 plain dresses, a hairbrush, her mother's Bible, and a faded wedding photograph. With a last look at the cabin, she set the key beneath the mat as instructed and started down the long road toward Copper Ridge. By midday, blisters burned on her heels and hunger clawed at her stomach. Aspen groves shimmered gold, and pine ridges loomed dark against the horizon. Fear crept in. She had never walked so far on her own. The sound of hoofbeats thundered closer, quickening her breath. Strangers could be dangerous. Her father had warned. She darted behind a boulder as a lone rider appeared astride a chestnut stallion. The man wore a weathered duster, hat pulled low, yet his relaxed seat in the saddle spoke of calm strength rather than menace. "Afternoon, miss," he called, reining in his horse. "Long trail for a woman to be walking alone." "I'm bound for Copper Ridge," Eleanor replied, clutching her small bundle tighter. He tipped his hat, revealing sun-darkened features and clear blue eyes. "Town's another 15 miles. You won't make it before nightfall, and there's a storm rolling in." As if on cue, a low rumble echoed across the mountains. "I'll manage," she said, though her voice wavered. The man swung down from the saddle, moving with easy grace. "Name's Caleb Rook, though most folks call me Cal. Got a cabin a couple miles west. You're welcome to wait out the storm. I'm heading to Copper Ridge myself come morning." Eleanor lifted her chin. "I don't take handouts from strangers." "Mr. Rook." A small smile tugged at his mouth. "Not charity. Ma'am, just neighborly sense. Pneumonia won't help whatever it is you're searching for." Her protest faltered, and he added gently, "Looking for a new beginning?" She nodded, startled at his perception. "Well then, A warm meal and a dry bed. No strings attached. You have my word. Another crash of thunder drew nearer, forcing her choice. Thank you, Mr. Rook, she whispered. He offered his hand, rough but steady, and helped her onto the stallion. Comet, leading the reins. He walked beside her. You needn't walk, she said softly. My mother raised me better than to ride while a lady trudges. He replied. Comets carried heavier loads through worse passes. The steady beat of hooves and the whistle of wind filled the silence. From her perch, Eleanor studied him, the broad shoulders, the unhurried stride. Finally, she asked, What brings you here? Mr. Rook cattle, he answered. I've built up a little ranch south of Copper Ridge. Started with 10 head. Up to 200 now. Not much by some standards, but it's mine. Pride warmed his tone. And you, Miss Hart, my father's gone. The bank took our place at Willowbend Creek. I'm hoping to find work in Copper Ridge. Caleb's eyes softened with sympathy. I'm sorry for your loss, Miss Hart. Town's growing fast. I reckon there'll be work for a woman with grit. The first drops of rain splattered the dusty trail as Eleanor Hart spotted a small cabin tucked against a hillside. A ribbon of smoke curled from the stone chimney, giving the place an air of welcome despite the gathering storm. She glanced at Caleb Rook in surprise. You left a fire burning, she asked. Caleb shook his head, water already glistening on the brim of his hat. No. My foreman's likely here. Hank Mercer looks after the place when I'm on the trail. As if on cue, the cabin door swung open. An older man with a salt and pepper beard stepped out onto the porch, eyes narrowing against the pelting rain. About time you made it back. Cal, Hank called, his voice deep and familiar. Then his gaze landed on Eleanor. And you brought company. Caleb swung down and reached for Eleanor's hand, steadying her as she slipped from Comet's saddle. This is Miss Hart, he explained. She was walking to Copper Ridge alone. I thought it best she wait out the storm with us. Hank tipped his hat politely. You're welcome here, ma'am. Any friend of Cal's is a friend of mine. Eleanor felt heat rise to her cheeks at his kindness, though she was painfully aware of her travel-worn dress and the damp shawl clinging to her shoulders. Thank you, sir, she said quietly. Inside. The cabin proved warmer and more welcoming than she had expected. The stone hearth blazed with steady flames, throwing light across a solid wooden table and a set of chairs polished from years of use. A modest shelf sagged under the weight of well-thumbed books, and 2 narrow doors led off to bedrooms. Make yourself comfortable, Caleb said, shrugging off his leather duster and hanging it by the door. Hank's venison stew will chase off this chill. Been simmering all afternoon. The older man gave a satisfied grunt as he stirred the pot that hung over the fire. You've arrived just in time. Another hour and the road would have been a river. Rain hammered the windows, and thunder shook the walls. Yet the little cabin wrapped Eleanor in warmth. She had not known such safety since before her father's passing. They gathered at the table, and Hank ladled steaming bowls of stew. Conversation flowed easily between the 2 men tales of long cattle drives, the stubbornness of half-wild horses, the hard work of fencing rugged land. They never pressed Eleanor for details, though she noticed how Caleb's gaze sometimes lingered on her with quiet curiosity. After the meal, Hank pulled on his slicker. I'll head to the bunkhouse. The hands'll be needing an extra set of eyes with this weather. Eleanor rose at once. Please, I can take a corner here. You shouldn't give up your own bed. Caleb shook his head firmly. The spare room is yours tonight. Miss Hart, I'll join the men in the bunkhouse. I've slept there more nights than I can count. Left alone in the cabin." Eleanor wandered to the small room he had offered. The iron bed bore crisp linens, and a washstand held a pitcher of clean water. On the wall hung a small painting of mountain wildflowers, their bright colors softened with age. The sight tugged at memories of her mother's garden along Willowbend Creek, and for the first time since her father's death, her shoulders eased. She washed, brushed the tangles from her hair, and slipped into bed. Outside, the storm raged fierce, but inside the sturdy walls she felt cocooned, as though the world's troubles might pause for a night. Sleep came quickly and deep. Morning broke bright and clear. Sunlight streamed through the single window. Birds called from the hillside, and for a moment Eleanor forgot where she was. Then the memory of the previous evening returned, along with an odd sense of gratitude. When she stepped into the main room, Caleb was already setting out tin plates, the smell of coffee filling the air. "Good morning," he said with an easy smile. "Did you rest well? Better than I have in months," she admitted. "Thank you for everything." He shrugged lightly, just doing what any neighbor should. But they both knew not everyone would have offered shelter to a stranger in these parts. They ate flapjacks and strong coffee before readying Comet for the road. This time Caleb insisted she ride behind him. "Hold tight," he said as he guided the horse onto the trail. Eleanor hesitated before laying her hands lightly on his waist. As the horse navigated the uneven ground, she found herself clutching firmer, every jolt pressing her against the solid strength of the man before her. She told herself it was necessity, nothing more, but her heart beat faster all the same. The journey passed swiftly beneath the rhythm of hooves and the smell of wet earth. At last, the valley opened before them, revealing Copper Ridge sprawled across the basin. Wooden buildings gleamed with new roofs. Wagons rolled steadily through the muddy streets, and smoke from countless chimneys curled skyward. "It's bigger than I imagined," Eleanor breathed. 2 years back they struck silver in the hills. Caleb explained, brought miners, merchants, drifters, everyone chasing fortune. Town's been growing faster than it can keep up. Down the main street they rode, passing a bank with polished windows, 3 lively saloons, a hotel boasting fresh paint, and rows of shops. Women in plain calico hurried with baskets. Businessmen in Eastern suits strode with importance, and grimy miners staggered out of taverns. "Do you have folks here?" Caleb asked. She shook her head. "No one. I thought perhaps the hotel might take me on, or a restaurant." He frowned slightly. "The Sagebrush House isn't the sort of place I'd send you. Better to try Mrs. Ada Whitfield's boarding house. She's respectable and fair." Mrs. Whitfield proved to be a round woman with sharp eyes and a firm manner. After hearing Eleanor's story, she offered a small room at a reduced rate. 2 weeks. "Dear, until you find your footing," she said briskly. "And I'll ask around." The Carter's General Store may be looking Samuel Carter's wife has her hands full with their new baby. Eleanor accepted, relief washing through her. On the porch, Caleb lingered with his hat in hand. "I've business in town for a few days. Would it trouble you if I stopped by tomorrow, just to see you're settling in?" Something warm stirred in Eleanor's chest. "That would be kind. Thank you." He nodded, replaced his hat, and mounted Comet. "Until tomorrow, Miss Hart." She watched him ride away, dust rising from the street behind him, and wondered at the strange turn of fate that had carried her from loneliness on the road to the doorstep of a man like Caleb Rook. True to his word, Caleb returned the next afternoon. By then, Eleanor had already secured a position at Carter's General Store. beginning the very next day. The thought of steady work and her own small room lifted her spirit. And yet, as she looked up to see him striding toward her with that quiet confidence, she realized the future might hold more than just survival. The relief of steady employment gave Eleanor Hart a sense of lightness she had not felt in months. As she walked the boardwalk beside Caleb Rook, she said, "Mary Carter seems kindly. She's offered me 6 days a week at the store, and Samuel Carter says if I show skill with figures, he'll teach me bookkeeping." Caleb gave a slow nod. "That's good fortune. The Carters are well respected here. You'll be in good hands." They passed a blacksmith shop and a saloon spilling piano music into the muddy street. Caleb lifted his hat in greeting to men who called out his name. Eleanor felt eyes upon her from every corner. "Everyone is staring," she murmured, lowering her gaze. Caleb chuckled softly. "That's a small town for you. A new face always draws a glance, especially walking alongside me. Are you notorious, then, Mr. Rook?" she teased. He guided her carefully around a puddle. "Nothing so interesting. Just a rancher who keeps to himself. Though I suppose they're not used to seeing me with a woman as lovely as you." The warmth that rushed to her cheeks startled her. She had been called pretty, perhaps, but never beautiful. Words deserted her. Caleb's smile faded, replaced by a look of apology. "Forgive me. I didn't mean to overstep." "No, it's all right," she said quickly. "I'm simply not accustomed to hearing such things." He studied her for a moment longer, but let the matter rest. The following 2 weeks settled into a rhythm. Eleanor worked hard at Carter's general store, learning quickly and proving her worth. Mary Carter praised her neat ledgers and steady hands, and Samuel trusted her with weighing goods and tallying accounts. Each evening she returned to Mrs. Ada Whitfield's boarding house, her modest room filled with the scent of soap and the murmur of other boarders' conversations drifting through thin walls. Caleb appeared in town every few days. Sometimes they strolled the boardwalk. Sometimes he bought her supper at a small eatery that served hearty stew and fresh bread. People watched them with frank curiosity, but Caleb seemed unconcerned. Mrs. Whitfield, watching from her porch, approved. "The Caleb Rook is a good man," she told Eleanor one evening as the two women rocked side by side. "Built his ranch from nothing when he came back from the war. Never stirs trouble, pays what he owes, treats folk fair." "You've known him long?" Eleanor asked. "Since the day he rode into Copper Ridge 6 years ago. He stayed here at my boarding house while putting up his first cabin, carried his own boards, cut his own timber. I saw the sweat on his back and the grief in his eyes." "What grief?" Eleanor pressed gently. Mrs. Whitfield's rocking slowed. "Lost his whole family in the war. Father, mother, younger brother, all gone. He came west after, like many others, searching for a fresh start." Eleanor was silent. The knowledge explained the quiet sorrow she sometimes glimpsed in Caleb's eyes, a grief that mirrored her own. On the 3rd Sunday since her arrival, Caleb invited her to ride outside town. Mary Carter had given Eleanor Sundays free, and the day dawned bright and mild. Caleb arrived with Comet and a gentle mare named Maple. "Thought you might like a horse of your own today," he said. "I haven't ridden since I was a girl." She confessed, "Maple's steady as they come. She'll mind her step." They set out, following a clear stream that wound through golden aspens. Eleanor's body remembered the rhythm, and soon she rode with ease beside him. Conversation came easily. Caleb spoke of fencing pastures, branding calves, and the stubbornness of steers, while she told him small stories of her childhood along Willowbend Creek. They reached a meadow where wildflowers still clung in late-season blooms. Caleb spread a blanket and drew food from his saddlebag. They ate in companionable silence, listening to the murmur of water and the calls of unseen birds. At length, Caleb leaned back on his elbows, sun warming his face. "May I ask you something, Eleanor?" It was the first time he had spoken her given name. "Yes," she answered, surprised by the intimacy of the sound on his tongue. "What do you hope for? Will you stay in Copper Ridge?" She twisted a blade of grass between her fingers. "I don't know. The store work is good, and Mrs. Whitfield lets me stay as long as I need. But it doesn't feel like home." He nodded slowly. "I know that emptiness. After the war, I wandered near 2 years. Cattle drives, odd jobs, moving from place to place. Nothing felt right until I found this valley." "What made it different?" she asked softly. He sat upright, eyes intent on hers. "I realized home isn't only a piece of land. It's a feeling. These mountains spoke to me. I knew I could build something lasting here." Eleanor thought of her father's words, that their family was rooted to their land like the old oak beside the creek. She had believed losing it meant losing everything. Perhaps he had been wrong. Perhaps roots could grow again in new soil. "Maybe home is something you carry inside," Caleb suggested gently, "something you choose to rebuild." Their eyes met, and in that moment she felt a kinship deeper than friendship. He understood loss, the hollow ache, the need to begin again. A low rumble broke the stillness. Dark clouds gathered over the western peaks. "We should ride back," Caleb said reluctantly. They packed swiftly and mounted up. Wind rose, sharp and cold. Halfway to town, the heavens opened in a sudden downpour. Rain soaked through Eleanor's dress in minutes. "There's a line shack up ahead," Caleb shouted over the storm. "We'll wait it out there." They urged the horses forward. Reaching a small structure tucked among the pines, Caleb leapt down, leading both animals into the lean-to. Eleanor hurried inside. The shack was one room, rough-hewn but dry. A fireplace stood against the far wall, a crude table and chairs nearby. Shelves stocked with beans and coffee suggested it served as a shelter for ranch hands on long rides. A narrow bed occupied one corner. Eleanor wrapped her arms around herself, shivering. Caleb entered, water dripping from his hat and duster. He built a fire with practiced efficiency, soon filling the space with warmth and the smell of smoke. Eleanor stood by the flames, watching his strong hands work the kindling. She thought of Mrs. Whitfield's words, of the sorrow Caleb carried, and the strength with which he built his life anew. The storm raged outside, but in that humble cabin she felt something stirring, a sense of safety she had thought forever lost. The cabin door banged against the wall as Eleanor Hart stepped inside. Rain streaming from her dress, the fabric plastered to her skin. She flushed with self-consciousness at the thought of how disheveled she must appear. Moments later, Caleb Rook followed, his duster dripping, saddlebag slung over one shoulder. "At least we won't go hungry," he said with a crooked grin, setting the bags down. Then he noticed her trembling. "You're chilled through. Let me see to a fire." He worked with brisk efficiency, stacking wood from the pile beside the hearth, striking flint, and coaxing the flames until the room glowed warm. Sparks leapt up, and soon the crackle of fire filled the small shack. "There should be blankets in that trunk," Caleb said, pointing with his chin. "And I believe I saw coffee beans on the shelf. I'll tend the horses." By the time he returned, Eleanor had wrapped herself in a wool blanket and was heating water over the fire. The storm outside had grown fierce, rain lashing the roof with steady fury. "Looks like we'll be here a while," Caleb said, hanging his dripping hat and coat near the flames. "That weather isn't letting up any time soon." Eleanor handed him a steaming cup. "I'm sorry our picnic ended like this." He took it with a nod of thanks, his smile genuine. "Don't be. I'm enjoying the company more than the setting ever mattered." They sat side by side on rough chairs, coffee warming their hands, while the storm howled. Caleb spoke of his early years ranching the cattle he lost, the mistakes he learned from, the slow building of his herd until his small spread became something worth defending. His voice carried the steadiness of a man who had survived hardship and come through stronger. Eleanor found herself telling stories, too, of her mother's laughter before illness claimed her, of her father's endless battle to keep their land at Willow Bend Creek despite mounting debts. Memories she had not spoken aloud in years spilled out with surprising ease. As evening settled, the rain showed no sign of easing. A new awareness lingered in the space between them, an unspoken question about what the night might bring. "I should ride back," Caleb said at last, though his tone held little conviction. "Mrs. Ada Whitfield will worry, and tongues wag quickly if we both stay gone till morning." In this storm, Eleanor's voice sharpened with concern. "You could be struck by lightning, or the horses could slip on the muddy trail. I'd rather endure gossip than see you harmed for the sake of my reputation." Caleb studied her face, his expression serious. "Are you sure?" She lifted her chin. "We are two grown people caught in a storm. There is nothing improper in that." Relief softened his features. "Thank you. I'll admit the thought of riding into that deluge didn't sit well." He opened a cupboard and pulled out supplies. "Let's see what dinner we can manage." They shared beans, jerky, and hard bread, washing it down with more coffee. The fare was plain, yet the comfort of eating together made it seem like a feast. Eleanor realized how easy his presence felt, no pressure to fill silence, no judgment in his eyes. When the meal was done, Caleb spread a blanket on the floor near the fire. "You take the bed," he said firmly. "I can't put you out of it," she protested. "I've slept on worse than this many a night." He answered, "Compared to the ground, this floor is a luxury." Reluctantly, she agreed. She lay down beneath the scratchy wool, listening to the steady patter of rain on the roof and Caleb's quiet breathing across the room. Strangely, she felt no fear, only a deep sense of safety. "Caleb," she whispered. "Yes, thank you. Not just for today, but for every kindness since we met. You've given me more comfort than you know." Silence lingered before he answered softly, "You don't need to thank me, Eleanor. I valued every moment with you." Her heart swelled at the words, though she could not voice a reply. The quiet stretched, filled with things neither dared say. After a time, his voice reached her again, low and thoughtful. "May I ask something personal? You've never spoken of anyone special from back home. Was there truly no one?" Eleanor stared up at the rough ceiling beams. "There was someone once, Nathaniel Hale. We grew up side by side, and everyone assumed we'd marry. But when my mother died and my father struggled to keep the farm, Nathaniel drifted away. He began courting the banker's daughter instead." She exhaled a long breath. "He was a fool," Caleb said simply. "Perhaps," she murmured. "Or perhaps he was practical. Why tie himself to a girl burdened with debts and fading land?" "Because love isn't about practicality," Caleb replied, his voice carrying an edge of intensity. "It isn't numbers in a ledger. Real love means standing beside someone in hardship, not just basking in ease. His words stirred something buried deep within her, a longing she had locked away after Nathaniel's betrayal. "I'm not sure I would know what true love is anymore," she admitted softly, "or if I could recognize it, even if it stood before me." The fire popped and crackled in the silence that followed. Caleb's answer came measured, almost reverent. "When it's real, you won't need to puzzle it out. You'll know, as natural as drawing breath." Eleanor turned his words over in her mind until sleep claimed her, soothed by the rain's rhythm and the quiet strength of the man nearby. Morning dawned bright. The storm swept clean from the sky. Birds sang in the trees, and the air smelled of pine washed new. Eleanor rose, smoothed her hair, and stepped outside to find Caleb already tending to Comet and Maple. "It's a beautiful morning," she said, breathing in deeply. "The best kind," he replied, smiling as he turned to her. "Storms clear away what's worn and leave the world fresh again." They mounted and rode toward Copper Ridge in companionable silence, both aware that something subtle had shifted during the night. They had crossed an unseen boundary, shared truths rarely spoken, and built a bond that neither had expected. As the town's rooftops came into view, Caleb cleared his throat. "Eleanor, I'll need to be away for a time." Her heart gave a small jolt, though she kept her voice steady. Away he nodded, eyes on the horizon. "Business at the ranch. Matters I cannot put off, but I'll return." Eleanor said nothing more, but as they rode into town she felt a new awareness within her. Something had changed between them, within her. The storm had left more than the earth renewed. It had awakened her heart. "There's a cattle auction in Denver I've had my sights on." Caleb Rook told Eleanor Hart as they rode toward the edge of Copper Ridge. "I'll be away about 2 weeks." The news struck harder than Eleanor expected, leaving her chest oddly hollow. "Oh, when do you leave tomorrow morning?" "Before first light." He glanced her way, almost apologetic. "I meant to tell you yesterday, but the storm had other plans." She forced a small smile. "I hope the trip goes well." His next words caught her off guard. "Would you mind if I wrote while I'm gone?" A faint uncertainty colored his tone, rare for a man so sure in every other way. Her answer came quick and honest. "I'd like that very much." They parted at Mrs. Ada Whitfield's boarding house, their handshake oddly formal after all they had shared. Eleanor lingered on the porch long after he'd disappeared down the street, the emptiness inside her growing heavier by the minute. Mrs. Whitfield was waiting, her sharp eyes curious. "Storm kept you out last night," Eleanor explained about being caught at one of Caleb's line shacks. The older woman chuckled knowingly. "Providence looks after good souls, and you and Caleb Rook are no fools. That's certain." The days stretched endlessly after he left. Eleanor threw herself into her duties at Carter's General Store, double-checking account ledgers until Samuel Carter praised her precision. In the evenings, she scrubbed dishes or mended linens for Mrs. Whitfield. Then joined the other boarders, 2 young teachers and an aging widower for simple suppers and the occasional card game. But her thoughts were never far from Caleb, thou 5 days into his absence. A knock on the boarding house door brought a surprise. Hank Mercer, Caleb's trusted foreman, had come to town on ranch business. He handed Eleanor an envelope sealed with Caleb's tidy hand. Her heart raced as she slipped away to her room. The letter was written on fine paper, the script strong and confident. Caleb described his journey south, the wide plains, the crowded roadways leading into Denver, and the bustle of a city growing faster than anyone had dreamed. He spoke of the auction yards, the prime cattle he was eyeing, and the men he bargained with. But it was the final lines that she read again and again. The mountains here are impressive, but none compare to the view from Copper Ridge, nor the company I had while admiring it. Her cheeks warmed as she folded the letter carefully, then reached for pen and ink. She wrote back that very night, telling of her long hours at the store, the gossip Mrs. Whitfield relayed with relish, and the sense of belonging she was slowly beginning to feel. She paused over the closing, hesitated, then signed simply, "Your friend, Eleanor." Yet the word felt too small for what she had begun to feel. A second letter arrived 3 days before his expected return. This one carried news that made her pulse quicken. The auction proved more fruitful than I dared hope. I secured 30 head of prime stock at a fair price and struck an agreement to supply beef to the new military fort near Laramie. This will mean expanding the ranch considerably. I have already hired 6 more hands who will drive the herd north with me. The letter ended with a confession. This is the chance I've worked toward all these years, to build something lasting, something strong enough to sustain a family one day. The thought fills me with both excitement and fear. I keep recalling what you said, that home is something you carry inside. I believe it more than ever. I'll return by week's end. There are things I wish to speak with you about face to face. Eleanor lowered the page, her heart racing. Was he hinting at what she dared not name? The thought thrilled her, but also made her tremble. After Nathaniel Hale's betrayal, she had locked her heart away, convinced love was a luxury she could not afford. Could she trust again the day of Caleb's expected return? She could barely keep her mind on her work. She fumbled a customer's change and earned a gentle chiding from Mary Carter. Every time the bell over the shop door rang, she lifted her head with hope, only to feel the letdown of another face. By dusk, there was still no sign of him. Disappointed, she returned to the boarding house, where Mrs. Whitfield greeted her with news. "Hank just came through town," the landlady said, rocking on her porch chair. "Said a big herd's on the move from the south. They should be here tomorrow. Likely your Mr. Rook with his new cattle." "He isn't my Mr. Rook," Eleanor protested weakly, though her cheeks betrayed her with warmth. Mrs. Whitfield merely smiled knowingly and said no more. The following afternoon, commotion shook Copper Ridge. The air filled with the bawling of cattle, shouts of cowhands, and the thunder of hooves. Eleanor stepped onto the boardwalk, shielding her eyes against the sun. A sea of dust rolled down the main street, the herd guided skillfully by men on horseback. At the front rode Caleb, issuing commands with a voice that cut through the din. Sun and wind had bronzed his face during the long ride, and there was an undeniable authority in the way he handled both men and animals. He seemed somehow larger than life, a figure born for the saddle and the open range. Their eyes met across the chaos. For a heartbeat, the world around them disappeared. Caleb's stern expression softened into a radiant smile. He lifted a hand to his hat in greeting, but duty called, and he pressed forward with the herd. "Quite a sight." "Isn't it?" Samuel Carter remarked, stepping beside Eleanor on the boardwalk. "That's the biggest drive Rook's brought through town yet. Looks like he made out well in Denver." "Yes," Eleanor replied quietly, her eyes following Caleb until he vanished into the swirling dust. Her heart swelled with pride. "He's worked hard for this." Samuel Carter leaned on the post outside his store, eyes narrowing thoughtfully as he watched Eleanor Hart gaze after Caleb Rook and his herd. "He's a good man, that one," Carter said with quiet certainty. "Doesn't waste time in saloons, never touch the gaming tables, pays his debts, keeps his word, and treats folks fair." Eleanor gave a small nod. She had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed stirred a quiet pride within her. The town's eyes might be following her, whispering about her connection to Caleb, but for once she did not mind. Let them talk. That evening, as the boarders gathered for supper at Mrs. Ada Whitfield's long wooden table, a knock sounded at the door. Mrs. Whitfield answered and turned back with a sly smile. "Eleanor, it's for you." Caleb stood on the porch, hat in hand, trail dust still clinging to his coat. Despite the fatigue lining his features, his face lit up when he saw her. "Forgive me for interrupting your meal," he said, his voice low but warm. "I couldn't wait until morning. Would you join us?" "There's plenty," Eleanor offered quickly. He shook his head. "The herd needs settling. We're bedding them down just outside town tonight." But he hesitated, shifting slightly on his boots. "I was hoping you'd walk with me a moment," ignoring Mrs. Whitfield's knowing glance. Eleanor fetched her shawl and stepped outside. They strolled along a quiet street where lanterns flickered to life and the western sky burned with the last blaze of sunset. "Your letters didn't half capture how much I missed you," Caleb admitted. Heat rose in her cheeks. "I missed you, too." He stopped, turning to face her fully. "Eleanor, these past weeks gave me time to weigh my life. I've poured myself into the ranch, thinking it was enough, but it isn't. Not anymore. Something's missing. Someone to share it with." His blue eyes locked on hers, intense but tender. Her heart pounded in her chest. He raised his hands slightly. "I'm not asking for promises yet. I know our acquaintance is still young, but I want you to understand my intentions. I care for you more than I thought possible." She swallowed hard, then whispered the truth she had held back. "I already feel the same." Joy lit his face, transforming weariness into something brighter. He took her hands gently. "Then would you consider visiting my ranch this Sunday? I want you to see what I've built and what I hope to build yet." Her answer was steady, though her heart quivered. "I'd like that very much." He smiled, radiant against the fading sky. "I'll come for you after church." He walked her back to Mrs. Whitfield's, lingering at the steps. Lifting her hand, he pressed a soft kiss to her knuckles. "Until Sunday," he murmured. That night Eleanor barely slept. The thought of his words, his touch, his invitation spun through her mind like a restless wind. She had lost her parents, her home. Every anchor she'd known. Was she truly ready to open her heart again? The idea was both thrilling and frightening. Sunday dawned crisp and golden, the air sharp with autumn. Eleanor chose her best dress, a simple blue cotton that flattered her eyes. Mrs. Whitfield fussed over her hair, tucking a few late-blooming wildflowers into the coil. "You look lovely, dear," the older woman said with a satisfied nod. "That Caleb Rook won't know what struck him." Caleb arrived promptly after the church service, driving a polished buggy drawn by his stallion Comet. He helped Eleanor aboard, his hands lingering at her waist longer than necessary, his gaze holding hers a moment too long. The hour's journey passed quickly, the landscape rolling into open hills and bright meadows. At last Caleb reined the team to a stop atop a rise. Below stretched a wide valley where a clear stream glinted in the sun. At its center stood a grand log house, flanked by barns and sheds, cattle dotting the pastures beyond. "Welcome to Rook Ranch," he said, pride warming his voice. "It's beautiful," Eleanor breathed. He pointed to a smaller cabin near the main house. "That's where I started. Built the big house last year. Seemed empty with only me in it. but maybe it won't stay that way." His glance at her carried all the implication she could bear. As they rode down the slope, Eleanor noticed details the broad porch wrapping around 3 sides. A tall stone chimney, real glass windows that must have been hauled at great cost from the east. Inside, the house revealed a balance of utility and comfort. Sturdy oak furniture, shelves lined with books, woven rugs adding color against polished floors. A cast-iron stove gleamed in the kitchen. "You've created a home," she said softly, running her hand along a walnut dining table. "It still lacks a woman's touch," Caleb replied without hesitation. Then he caught himself, clearing his throat. "I wanted to build something that would last, before asking someone to share it with me." Their eyes met, and the room seemed to still, the air thick with unspoken meaning. He broke the moment with a quiet smile. "Let me show you the rest." The afternoon unfolded like a dream. Caleb led her through the barns, where Comet and the mares rested, the corrals, where bawling calves nosed at their mothers, the smokehouse stocked for winter. Hands tipped their hats as they passed, curiosity flickering in their eyes at the sight of a lady walking beside their boss. They paused by the stream for a picnic, spreading the same blanket they had once used on their first outing. As they ate, Caleb spoke of his vision expanding the herd, adding sheep, maybe even planting an orchard along the sunny southern slope. "You've thought of everything," Eleanor observed. "Not everything," he said quietly, his gaze lingering on her. The words sank deep, stirring emotions she could no longer deny. She looked out over the water, the mountains standing watch beyond, and wondered if perhaps, after all her losses, she had found not just refuge, but the possibility of love again. Caleb's words echoed through Eleanor Hart's mind long after she shut the boarding house door. "I'm falling in love with you." She had waited her whole life to hear those words, yet instead of filling her with joy, they had cracked open the deepest wounds of her soul. That night she lay awake, staring at the shadows on the ceiling. Memories crowded her mother's frail figure fading day by day, her father's weary face when the crops failed, the way Nathaniel Hale had walked away when her family needed him most. Every time she had opened her heart, loss had come. How could she risk that again, even for a man like Caleb Rook? The dawn was gray when she slipped from her bed. She dressed quickly, not wanting to meet Mrs. Ada Whitfield's keen gaze, and crept down the stairs. The boarding house was silent, save for the faint clatter of pans in the kitchen. Eleanor let herself out and hurried through the cool morning toward Carter's General Store. Samuel and Mary Carter had trusted her with a key, and she was grateful. Work was the only refuge she knew. She swept the floor, arranged the shelves, and tried to lose herself in ledgers and numbers. But no matter how hard she tried, Caleb's voice returned low, steady, sincere. "It's not just land and buildings. It needs love." The bell over the door jingled. Eleanor looked up, expecting a customer. Instead, Mrs. Whitfield bustled in, shawl wrapped around her shoulders, eyes sharp as ever. "I thought I might find you hiding here," Ada said, "wasting no time. Care to tell me why you ran away from that fine man last night?" Eleanor closed the ledger and rubbed her temples. "It's complicated. Love usually is," Ada replied gently, though her tone carried the weight of years of hard-earned wisdom. Eleanor tried to explain. "Everyone I've ever loved has been taken from me. First my mother, then my father. Nathaniel chose another. Every time I trust my heart, it's broken. I can't bear to lose again." Ada stepped closer, her face softening. Child, you can't live life waiting for grief at the door. If you shut your heart so tight nothing can touch it, you'll keep sorrow out, yes, but joy too. And Caleb Rook is no Nathaniel Hale. That man would walk through fire to keep his word. Tears pricked Eleanor's eyes, but she shook her head. I'm not strong enough to take that risk. Ada studied her a moment, then sighed. Strength isn't never being afraid, dear. Strength is loving anyway. Think on it. She turned and left without another word, leaving Eleanor trembling behind the counter.
The week that followed was a blur. Eleanor threw herself into her work, counting every coin twice, polishing the shelves until they shone. Caleb did not come by the store, though she caught sight of him once riding Comet along the ridge road. His hat pulled low. Her heart leapt at the sight, only to sink again when he did not stop. By Friday, whispers had begun around Copper Ridge. Folks who had seen Caleb escort her to dinner now murmured about why she seemed distant.
Eleanor bore it with tight-lipped silence. Still, every night she found herself staring at the ceiling, hearing his voice. That evening, Mrs. Whitfield joined her on the porch after supper. The autumn sky was clear, stars pricking the dark velvet overhead. You can't keep punishing yourself for things you couldn't control, Ada said softly. Your parents' passing wasn't your fault. Nathaniel's weakness wasn't your doing. You deserve more than a life half lived out of fear. Eleanor swallowed hard. But what if I open myself and lose everything again? Ada laid a hand over hers. Then you'll grieve, and you'll heal, just as you have before. But this time, you might not lose. Don't you think that chance is worth taking? Eleanor had no answer. The next morning brought a knock at the door just as Eleanor was tying her bonnet. When she opened it, she found Hank Mercer, Caleb's trusted foreman, standing there. Morning. Miss Hart, Hank said, shifting his hat awkwardly. Caleb asked me to deliver this. He handed her a folded note, the paper dusted with trail grit. Her hands shook as she opened it. Eleanor, I won't trouble you, but I need you to know last night was not meant to frighten you. I only spoke my truth. Whatever time you need, I'll wait. My feelings don't change with silence. Caleb. Her breath caught. The words were simple, steady, and more powerful than any declaration of grand passion could have been. He was not pressing her, not demanding. He was waiting. The day passed in a haze. She read the note again and again, her heart aching with both longing and fear. That night she lay awake once more, staring at the slip of paper on her nightstand. Ada's words returned, "Strength is loving anyway." Sunday morning dawned bright and cool. After church, Eleanor walked alone to Willowbend Creek, the stream where she had once gathered wildflowers with her mother. She sat on the bank, watching the water slide over stones. Her reflection trembled in the current, fractured and reformed again and again. She thought of Caleb's house in the valley, sturdy and waiting. She thought of his hand steady on hers as they danced, of his voice in the line shack speaking of home not as a place, but a feeling. She thought of how her heart had steadied in his presence, how laughter had come more easily than it had in years. A realization settled over her like sunlight breaking through clouds. Love was not a guarantee against loss. It never had been. But without it, life was only survival. Caleb was offering more than comfort. He was offering a chance to live fully again. That evening, Eleanor returned to the boarding house with mud on her hem and resolve in her heart. Mrs. Whitfield met her at the door. Well, Eleanor smiled faintly. I think I know what I have to do. She wrote a short note by lamplight, her pen trembling slightly as she formed the words, Caleb, I'm afraid, but I'm more afraid of letting fear decide my life. If your invitation still stands, I would like to visit the ranch again. Not just to see what you've built, but to see what we might build together. Eleanor. She sealed the note, left it with Mrs. Whitfield for Hank to deliver, and climbed into bed. For the first time in many nights, she slept deeply. Mrs. Ada Whitfield lowered herself onto the stool by the counter in Carter's General Store, her eyes steady on Eleanor Hart. Running away never fixes a thing. Child, she said. Eleanor swallowed hard. I wasn't running from Caleb, she whispered. He's never been anything but good to me. Ada folded her arms across her apron. Then what are you running from? The words tumbled out before Eleanor could stop them. I'm terrified of losing him, of opening my heart only to have it torn apart again, like every time before. My mother, my father, Nathaniel, they're all gone. If I let myself love Caleb Rook and then he leaves me, or worse. Her voice faltered. I don't think I could bear it. Understanding softened Ada's features. Ah, child, that's the gamble every one of us takes when we love. There are no guarantees in this life. But I'll tell you this, 30 years with my Harold were worth every ounce of the grief that came when the Lord called him home. Would I trade those years to avoid the pain? Not for all the gold in Wyoming. She reached across the counter, resting her work-roughened hand over Eleanor's trembling one. Love is always worth the risk. Eleanor pondered the words all through the day. When she locked the store that evening, she had nearly resolved to find Caleb, confess her fears, and beg his patience. But as soon as she returned to the boarding house, Ada met her in the hall with troubled news. Caleb stopped by while you were out. Said he's been summoned on urgent business. Something to do with that beef contract. He rode toward Fort Laramie not an hour past sundown. Tonight, Eleanor gasped, her chest tightening. Did he say when he'd be back? Ada shook her head slowly. Only that it might be a while. He looked mighty burdened, if you ask me. It felt as though the floor had opened beneath Eleanor's feet. Had she ruined everything with her panic? Would Caleb spend his time away, rethinking what he felt for her? Bon. The days that followed dragged endlessly. Eleanor buried herself in work, arriving early at Carter's General Store and staying late to balance ledgers by lamplight. She even volunteered to help Ada with boarding house accounts in the evenings, anything to keep her mind from circling back to that moment on the porch when she had turned Caleb away. 10 days after his departure, the store's bell jingled and Hank Mercer stepped inside. Dust clung to his boots, and he held his hat respectfully in his hands. Miss Hart, he said formally, the boss asked me to deliver this. He held out an envelope. Is he back? Eleanor asked, her voice too eager. Hank shook his head. Still at Fort Laramie. Says the officers are dragging their heels with all that paperwork. Negotiations are slower than cattle in mud. He hesitated, his weathered face serious. He seems quieter than usual. Guilt cut through Eleanor like a knife. Thank you, Hank, she murmured. When he left, she tore the seal with trembling fingers. Eleanor, I write from Fort Laramie, where the soldiers move at their own pace. The contract crawls forward, but I expect resolution soon. I must apologize for my sudden departure. After our evening together, I realized I had spoken too quickly and caused you distress. That was never my intent. My feelings remain, but I will accept whatever yours may be. If all you wish is friendship, I will treasure that. I hope to return to Copper Ridge by month's end." Caleb tears blurred the neat script. Even now, thinking she had rejected him, Caleb still put her comfort above his own longing. How many men would show such grace? That night Eleanor lit her lamp, pulled out pen and paper, and poured her heart into words she should have spoken long before. "Caleb, your letter finds me well, though restless. The fault of our parting was mine alone. You spoke truth, while I let fear guide me. I have lost everyone I loved, my mother to illness, my father to grief, Nathaniel to ambition. Those losses taught me to shut my heart. But in your absence, I have learned something vital. I already love you. The ache I feel each day without you proves it. I miss your smile, your quiet strength, the steadiness you bring to every moment. If you still want it, I offer you my heart, my trust, my future. I cannot promise never to be afraid again, but I can promise to face my fears if you walk beside me. Eleanor." She folded the note carefully and handed it to Hank the next morning when he stopped by for supplies. The waiting that followed was harder than any before. Every day she scanned the dusty street through the store windows, searching for a tall rider on a dark stallion. Each night she lay awake, wondering if Caleb had read her words, if he still cared, if he would come. 2 weeks later, while Eleanor was arranging bolts of new fabric in the store, Mary Carter called softly, "Eleanor, there's someone here to see you." Her heart leapt as she turned. Caleb stood in the doorway, leaner, sun-browned from weeks outdoors. His travel-worn coat hung heavy on his shoulders, but his blue eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that stole her breath. "Caleb," she whispered. "Miss Hart," he said carefully, "could you step outside a moment?" Mary gave her an encouraging smile. "Go on, dear. I'll mind the counter." On the boardwalk, Eleanor stood facing him, her pulse wild. The words she had written suddenly seemed clumsy, inadequate. "You received my letter." She managed. "I did." His tone was steady, though his eyes searched hers. "And did you believe it?" His posture softened just slightly. "Did you mean every word, every last one?" she said without hesitation. Something inside him seemed to ease. He stepped closer. "I've thought about what you wrote about fear, about loss. I can't promise you'll never lose me. Eleanor, none of us know what tomorrow holds, but I can swear this so long as I draw breath. I will never choose to leave you. I will fight my way back to you. Always." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I don't know how to be loved anymore," she admitted. "I've been alone too long." Caleb lifted a calloused hand, brushing one tear gently away. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Then let me teach you." Her last defenses broke. She stepped into his arms, feeling his strength wrap around her, the steady rhythm of his heart against her cheek. "I love you, Caleb Rook," she murmured into his chest. "I'm sorry I was too afraid to say it before." He tilted her face upward. "And I love you, Eleanor Hart. I'll spend every day showing you that love is nothing to fear." This time, when his lips found hers, she didn't pull away. She melted into the kiss, pouring into it all the emotion she had held back. For a moment, Copper Ridge faded the street, the curious passers-by, even the ache of the past. There was only the joy of finding one another again. That evening at the boarding house, Caleb asked formally for her hand. Ada Whitfield dabbed tears from her eyes as she declared she had known from the start this was where the story would lead. "Some things," Ada Whitfield said as she dabbed at her eyes that morning, "are simply meant to be." 6 weeks after Eleanor Hart had whispered her love to Caleb Rook on the dusty boardwalk of Copper Ridge, the little white church on Main Street filled with townsfolk. The Carters stood as witnesses, with Hank Mercer at Caleb's side and Mrs. Ada Whitfield beaming from the front pew. Eleanor walked down the aisle in a cream silk gown ordered from Denver, her dark hair adorned with wildflowers in place of a veil. Caleb's breath caught as he watched her approach, his blue eyes never leaving her face. Their vows were plain-spoken, yet powerful, words born from truth rather than ornament. When Caleb promised to cherish and protect her for all his days, Eleanor felt the last remnants of fear dissolve. At last. This was right. This was home. The ride to Rook Ranch afterward was alive with laughter and plans for the future. Caleb pointed out changes he had made during the weeks leading up to the wedding. A garden plot tucked behind the big log house, fresh curtains hanging in the windows, a sturdy rocking chair waiting on the porch. Ada helped with the curtains, Caleb admitted with a sheepish smile. "I wanted it to feel like your home from the moment you stepped inside." As they reached the house, Caleb surprised her by sweeping her into his arms. "Tradition," he explained with a grin, carrying her over the threshold. Inside, the house glowed with warmth. Fresh flowers sat in vases. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, though the autumn day was mild. On the long table, a dinner of roast chicken and baked bread awaited, prepared earlier by the ranch cook before he and the hands disappeared to the bunkhouse to give the couple privacy. "Welcome home, Mrs. Rook," Caleb murmured, still holding her close. "Home," Eleanor repeated softly, tasting the word. "Yes. This feels like home already." That evening, twilight gave way to a sky littered with stars. They stood together on the porch. Caleb's arm wrapped around Eleanor's shoulders, her head resting against his chest. "Are you happy?" he asked, brushing a kiss against her temple. "Happier than I ever believed possible," she answered. "I wasted so long afraid to love, afraid to lose. But you were right. Home isn't walls or fences. It's a feeling. And home is wherever you are." Caleb's smile glowed even in the moonlight. "Then let me take you inside, Mrs. Rook. Let's start our life together." Spring swept into the valley in a burst of wildflowers and new calves. Eleanor, once the uncertain newcomer, settled into ranch life with surprising ease. She cultivated a garden of vegetables and herbs, learned to make cheese from the dairy herd, and even grew comfortable riding Maple, the gentle mare Caleb had first saddled for her. On their 6-month anniversary, Caleb led Eleanor back to the meadow where they had shared their first picnic. Beneath a crab apple tree in bloom, he spread a blanket and unpacked a basket of cold chicken, fresh bread, and strawberry preserves Eleanor had put up the summer before. "I've something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. He placed a small velvet pouch in her hand. Inside was a delicate gold locket. When Eleanor opened it, she gasped. One side held a tiny copy of the photograph of her parents she had carried since girlhood. The other side contained a new picture of herself and Caleb on their wedding day. Her eyes filled with tears. "How did you manage this?" "I asked a photographer in Denver to copy your parents' portrait. I wanted you to have them close always, along with what we've begun together." Eleanor threw her arms around his neck. "It's perfect. You're perfect." Caleb laughed, shaking his head. "Hardly perfect. but I'll always try to be the man you need." "You already are," she whispered. As the sun dropped low, Eleanor rested her head on his shoulder. Then, with a shy smile, she said, "I have something for you, too. Not something I can wrap." She took his hand and placed it gently against her stomach. "But in about 7 months, there will be 3 of us here." Caleb's eyes widened. "Are you sure?" Eleanor nodded, joy radiating from her face. "Dr. Miller confirmed it yesterday." With a whoop of delight, Caleb leapt to his feet, lifting Eleanor in a circle before remembering himself and setting her down quickly. "Should I not have done that? I don't want to harm you or the baby." She laughed, cupping his face. "We're fine, Caleb, both of us." He placed his hand reverently on her belly, still flat beneath her dress. "A child," he whispered, awestruck. "Our child." They rode home beneath a sky ablaze with sunset. Eleanor's thoughts drifted back to the road where she had first trudged into Copper Ridge alone, frightened, unsure of her place in the world. Now, she was wife to a man she loved beyond words and mother-to-be in a home filled with warmth. "What's on your mind?" Caleb asked, glancing at her thoughtful expression. "How much life has changed since meeting you," she said. "How you taught me to love again when I believed that part of me was gone forever." Caleb reached across and squeezed her hand. "We taught each other. You showed me that a house isn't a home until it's alive with love, in the softening light." Eleanor saw their future unfold in her mind's eye, their child running free through the meadow, perhaps brothers and sisters to follow. Years of labor? Yes, but also years of joy, laughter, and partnership. The frontier would not be kind. There would be hardship and storms. But for the first time since she was a girl, Eleanor faced tomorrow without fear. Whatever came, they would face it together, and that made all the difference. "I love you, Caleb Rook," she said, her voice steady. He smiled, warm as the setting sun. "And I love you, Eleanor Rook, today, tomorrow, and all the days to come." As the lights of their home came into view, glowing through the windows like beacons, Eleanor felt a fullness in her heart that words could never capture. This was where she belonged. This was her love. It was more than enough. It was everything. As we grow older, we learn that life is not defined only by what we have gained, but also by what we have lost. Many of us have said goodbye to loved ones, endured grief, or faced years where loneliness seemed heavier than hope. That is why Eleanor and Caleb's story speaks so deeply. It reminds us that love is never without risk but without love. Life is only half lived. For those of us over 60, the lesson is not about romance alone. It is about courage. It is about opening ourselves again to family, to friendship, to joy, despite the fear of loss. Pain is real, but so is the healing that comes from connection. Eleanor thought her heart was closed forever, yet she discovered that with trust and patience, even old wounds can blossom into new beginnings. This story invites us to look at our own lives and ask, where have we allowed fear to silence love? And what might change if we chose to risk opening the door again? The answer, perhaps, is that love remains the most powerful gift we can give and receive at any age. Thank you so much for spending your time with this story. If it moved you, please give it a like, share it with someone you care about, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us keep bringing stories that inspire, heal, and remind us all of the power of love.